Today is January 3rd. We are in Nevada in the desert at a racetrack. And I have Malte Sievers here of Mercedes who's going to talk to us about the EQXX. This is a car I have ridden on as a passenger. I've driven, and you guys are showing again here. And I'm super excited about the technology in this car. So I want to thank Mercedes, by the way, for bringing us to Las Vegas and putting us up. That was super awesome. And so, Malte, there's a few things that are really standing out to me in the technology in this car. It's kind of breaking a lot of rules, right? And that's kind of what I want to talk about with you.
Okay.
Efficiency is the key, and you guys are really focusing on that by doing things like passive cooling, right? Like you're not using liquid cooling on the battery, for example. And that makes the pack smaller and lighter with the same kind of energy density. And you're using a rear motor only in this particular car for efficiency. And then there's Aero. And so walk us through all the different steps that really make the tech unique on this car compared to like the production EVs that my audience is familiar with.
Yeah, gotcha. So we started in the middle of 2020 with this car. And our original like goal or task or whatever you want to call it was to build a full electric car that can actually go further than 1,000 kilometers or further than 620 miles on a single charge, right? So that was the big kicker at the start. That's what we wanted to build. And we realized basically at the first day, that we got to go, like you said, like we got to put all these new technologies in there.
Break the rules.
Right. Put everything like a way that we did before and just start fresh, start fully fresh. Because that is a lot further than we've ever gone with any other fully electric vehicle. And so you need to like find new ways of doing it, right? If you want to go further, you got to get new technologies in there. And that's what we did. And like you said before, it's a whole bunch of technologies, right? It's not one thing. You might think you could just get a ginormous battery, right? With a huge amount of energy in it. Which in theory you can do. We just don't feel like that's going to get us where we want to go.
That's kind of what Lucid is doing in a way, right? But they're doing it the traditional way, right? Like they're not breaking that many rules.
I mean, to be fair, we still want to have as much energy in there as possible, right? We want to get the density as high as possible, but we realized we got to be efficient. Like the key to the success of a car like this is efficiency. And that's why you need efficient technologies in there.
So we have a 100 kilowatt pack roughly usable,
right? Yeah.
And it is, remind me how much smaller and lighter it is than an equivalent like EQS pack.
Right. So in comparison to the EQS right now, it's like roughly 50% less in volume and 30% less in weight.
So what is roughly the weight of the car to give people perspective?
Right. So this is, going in like SI European measurements, right? So it's 1,750 kilograms. I think that's like 3,850-ish pounds, roughly,
So
right?
That's
in that area.
Pretty light for even an EV, generally a 100 kilowatt style EV. So, so that's a big savings right there. And then in size, it means you can make a car that's really sleek, right? This is a 4-door, 4-seater, kind of a coupe, sporty GT car. And you're not sacrificing any comfort and any performance, I think. I mean, I've driven the car, and that's the other thing that blows my mind. Rear motor, single motor, and it is about 200-something, 300 horsepower, and it feels way faster because you have so much less weight to move around. And then, of course, it improves the handling because you don't need air suspension anymore. You can do simpler suspension system. So every component gets lighter. Right? And that adds to the final tally of weight saving. So talk us through some of the decisions that were made at like the motor, the braking, the suspension setup to reduce now that we have a lighter battery to start with.
So it is a 4-door coupe. But we didn't start out, like we didn't decide we want to build a 4-door coupe. We basically found the form of the car while thinking about what we wanted to achieve with the car, right? So this is really the shape and the concept you need to have a car that can travel that far with that little amount of energy.
Plus, you had to do the Aero, right? The Aero is so critical. So you had to really design the car around the Aero, but you made it look good. So what I love about this car personally is that it's a concept, guys, but it's not. It drives. You get in the car, it feels like a production car. All the buttons work. Everything is there. It just feels like a car from 10 years from now, but exists today. That's the thing that blows my mind that you did.
So there's a whole bunch of things when we try to we basically, as you do, you create a concept, you look at all the individual areas of development of a car that you can optimize, and then you need to prioritize, basically, right? You have some things that are more important and that just have a larger lever on efficiency than others, right? As you've said, like aerodynamics is key with a car like this because we want to travel fast. This car is really built for highways and the Autobahn in Germany and in Europe. So because we want to travel fast, that's why aerodynamics is so important. Right. If we build a city car, it'd be a slightly different story, right?
For sure. And but it's not the goal, right? The goal is you're trying to make a car that's a Mercedes in the tradition of a Mercedes, you know, Autobahn capable, cruiser, GT, press the pedal and it goes kind of experience.
Want to cross the continent, basically.
Yeah.
That kind of car.
1,000 kilometers.
Yep. Yeah.
So speaking of the little things you did, for example, my thought was when I first saw the car was, we'll have like the mirrors will be cameras. But that's a great anecdote. I want you to tell us this story.
Yeah, so that was a fun one. And we discussed that for, I think, at least like half a year maybe. Because like the first design models of it, and you might have seen it in Nice, like we've shown it. We had mirror cams on here first, and that's what we thought we were going to go with. And then what we did is basically took it apart because all sorts of departments have an influence on that, right? Because it's not just aerodynamics.
Yeah.
If you have a mirror cam, then you get displays in the car. You have wiring in there. Weight is always a thing you look at. Also, it's about how's the usage, right? So you want to have a nice, like the visibility of it all is important to it. And in the end, with this car, the rear view mirrors that we have on here now, they were just a better overall compromise for the car. And that's why we decided we need to go that way because we want to have the best efficiency compromise on the car.
It turns out the aero on those mirrors was better than the weight you would have added by putting all the electronics.
If you sum it all up, basically, right.
And so that goes to show how sometimes you simplify.
And maybe just as a like little side info there, if you look at like normal mirrors right now, those are different than this one, right? We have all sorts of things in there. Like we started putting them in there over the years, right? Kinds of blinkers, projectors, sensors, all sorts of things. That makes them real big, right? And there's a price you pay for having a mirror that big.
Right.
So we really like focus down on efficiency. And this is why this looks different now. But I think we're really happy with the result of it. And I think it's important for the industry to like refocus on things like this, right? We've built mirrors like this for 100 years now. And this is maybe like a little bit, like it gives it a heritage look in a way, I think, with the car, which I like. I like that.
Absolutely.
Because the mirror cam, you could look at it as sort of like non-realistic right now because you don't see it that much on cars. And it's kind of like a trick we're pulling, but we're not really pulling a trick here. It's just a normal mirror, but it's the most efficient and most aerodynamic one.
And I think it feels very familiar too for people, which is great. So I'm very intrigued about the cooling system in this car, right? Like we talked about the battery being essentially air-cooled. And there's this cooling plate that I think you used to cool the motor, correct?
Right.
And then there's a radiator in the front, but it's only used in extreme cases when the car isn't moving, for example, in a very hot climate. So walk us through how you were able to kind of like, there was a domino effect of using this battery system and the weight loss and all the other stuff that came from that, using a smaller motor because you can still go as fast with a small motor. And it's just the dominoes kept topping. Yeah. And then you get this really crazy cooling system.
Yeah. So you're totally right. We do have a passive cooling plate in the front. That's on the bottom of the front of the car. And air just streams over that. And whenever we want to cool the electric motor or the inverter, we can pump coolant through there and cool it down that way. The great thing about that is it's not actually in the wind. So wind does stream over it, but it doesn't increase the drag coefficient of the car.
Right.
So we're basically drag neutral, which with this, like that's perfect. That's what we want, right? No cost at all in terms of aero. We do have an active solution too. As you've said, we can open up shutters in the front, which more and more electric cars start doing that. Yeah. We've built that in case we want to cross some mountain range somewhere or want to go faster than like we usually would. We can open that up. But this is like, we don't need to open that for like 140 kilometers an hour on the Autobahn. This is more for more like special like slopes and stuff like that.
Got it. Or stop and go traffic jam.
One fun thing is though, which we've like sort of found out, because you need to decide to put that in there right at the start, basically, right? But now with the overall system and the overall efficiency of the drivetrain, which is at 95%, we're only losing 5% of the energy on the way from the cell to the wheel. We're not creating a lot of feet. So now in the end, while using this car, and I think it's nearly driven 20,000 kilometers now, this thing, which I would have never thought we were going to do.
It's kind of amazing. That's the other thing, compared to a normal concept. This thing has done miles.
A lot, way more than I would have thought. I would have bet that we're not even doing half of that. But in the end, we're not using the active cooling a lot because we've cut down on heat creation so much, which is basically the same as increasing the efficiency of the drivetrain. We're not losing energy in heat form, so we don't need to get rid of it. And then we don't need the cooling system to get rid of it. And then we get lighter, and that means less energy, and it's that kind of spiral that we're just
toppling dominoes. Right. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. I want to talk quickly about Aero and then the infotainment before we wrap up. So Aero, obviously the car, you can see in the video here, is really sleek, but you have this active rear wing that's kind of positioned down low. It's really cool looking. And all this together with the lower weight just makes it like incredible aerodynamic. Like, what's the drag coefficient right now?
So it's if the car is in the most aerodynamic setup, that means the front is closed, the shutters are closed, no active cooling, and the diffuser in the back that you just talked about is fully extended, then we're at 0.17 drag coefficient, which is the best EQS setup you can get is 0.2, which is basically the best you can get in series production right now. Yeah. And that step, it's kind of those coefficients are kind of tricky because it's such low numbers, right? You'd think 0.2 to 0.17 is not that much, but that is quite a leap. That's really
incredible to me. Far. But I think a lot of that to do is it's a very low strong car, right? Because you don't have a thick battery module in the middle between the front and rear axle, so you're able to put the driver, the passenger, the cabin lower, and you reduce the frontal area and blah, 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 again, dominoes. The infotainment is insanely cool. It's an entire micro LED panel that spans the entire dashboard, right? And you have basically made a bunch of optimizations around that. So it's like, tell us a little bit about that. And I know that you have a solar panel on the roof as well.
Sure thing.
That adds more efficiency and helps power the infotainment when you're stopped, for example, or whatever. And of course, the heating, cooling inside the car. You still need to cool the humans.
We do. Heat them and cool them.
So annoying.
Well, it's nice when you're in the car.
I know, right? So tell us quickly about the infotainment and what's different from what we're basically going to see 5 years, 10 years from now in a Mercedes.
Yeah. So we do, as you said, we have a huge screen, pillar to pillar, has no seams in it, right? It's the next step up from the hyperscreen. So we had a lot of room to play with, right? A lot of canvas to fill, really, right? Yeah. Which is, that's a new kind of challenge, right? Once you get to that level in terms of hardware, then you need to figure out the software for it, right? And that's what the team did. So what we have in there, which is really a fun thing to have with an efficiency car like this, we have a bunch of tech views, what we call them in there, which give you all kinds of data about the car, about what's happening in the situation right now, right? Just the live sensor data of it. So
I love the view of the airflow over the car. So you have a side wind or something. The fact that the car can sense that, display that on the screen.
Yeah. Because that's super important. Like, we looked at those kinds of like sensor values for the long drives that we did, right? That does have an impact on it. So it's important to inform the driver, like, what is the situation. We can change how aerodynamically efficient this car is by getting the diffuser out, opening the front, closing the front. There's a lot of stuff going on, and it's just a fun way of seeing it in a like nice 3D model, right? That you can like look around and just get all the information about the car.
No, it's pretty awesome. I loved it. One final thing. How can you explain to the audience why the battery is just air cooled and why that's not a problem? Because everybody always asks, like, it's not going to work. What if it's hot? What if it's cold?
So basically, that is also an early decision with a car like this, because as you've said before, it's a sleek car, right? It has a small frontal area, and the battery cooling is part of that, because the more stuff you put in a battery, the thicker it gets, right? So this cuts down on the height of it. The reasons why this works here, it's a number, right? So what's important is what kind of cell you have in the battery. So
it's a battery chemistry thing in part.
Also, because the less heat is created in the battery during usage, the less heat you need to get rid of, right? We do have the ability to have the bottom of it basically also act like a cooling plate. So that's also metal, so heat can also be taken away from it. And the fun thing while using this car, and you've driven an Immendingen, it was pretty hot back then, right?
It's pretty great.
It's basically always at ambient temperature, so we didn't have a lot of problems with that. One interesting caveat to take away from that. A lot of cars now, and we look at that too, focus on fast charging. We didn't do that with this car on purpose, right? We discussed it a lot, but in the end, we didn't choose that because then you would need huge cooling, right? We don't have that. The cool thing is though, because the car
still charges fast.
Right.
Now, it's not the same kind of fast as you used to in your normal EVs right now, but it's good enough to get you going on the road quickly.
Especially if you look at how much mileage you get per time, because that's really what we want, mileage per time. In the end, the customer rightfully doesn't really care about what kind of number there is, right? What really matters is what mileage am I getting? And here we're charging 300 kilometers per 15 minutes. We didn't try to optimize that. This is just a takeaway from focusing on efficiency and having a car that's really doesn't take a lot of energy.
Well, listen, Malte, we have to wrap up. So thank you so much for your in-depth look at the EQXX tech with me. I know there's so much more. We can't do it all in 15, 20 minutes, but I really appreciate that we tried.